In today's video, I'm going to look at an old Sony CCD F401. This is an old 8mm camcorder that goes back to about 1991, and it's in really sad shape. Well, I think today I'll tackle a handycam. There's no reason to even think about fixing something like this because I really have a use for it, but it was given to me. But I just wanted to try out my new Vessel micro screwdriver set that I picked up off of Amazon. This features a 0, a double 0, a triple 0, and a quadruple 0 micro. These are JIS bits, and of course it has two slotted bits, a 0.7 and a 0.9 millimeter. So I figured what would be better to try this out on than an old Sony camcorder that definitely does not work. If I turn this thing on, it's probably not even going to do anything. What's it going to do? It's going to, okay, you can see that the viewfinder is just kind of flickering there. There's no image. So this thing's definitely got some issues. I think it even has a tape in it. It does have a tape in it. Turn on the monitor and see if I get any video on the plasma. Okay, this one has the, as you can see, the monitor is hooked up. I'm just getting some lines in the screen. That's here's the camera picture. Yeah, it's pretty sad, and it's beeping. There's a good chance this one's not going to be fixable. It's going to be capacitors all over the place. So this one might just be a teardown, and this might not go back together, but I think we'll tear it down together. So first things first, let's remove the power adapter. You see, this one had the pins on it and the contacts. This was one of the ones that, this is a, what is this one? This is a CCD F401. The vintage of this would be 1991. So I think it's probably fairly unlikely that this thing is going to go back together and work. But it will be fun to take it apart. So let's see what size of screws I need. I don't even know what size these are. They're probably number 0. Yeah, these ones are number 0. Actually, this screwdriver fits great. Just a little reminder, this is going to be a relatively long video. So when you think it's just about over, and I'm sure it's probably steel, so hey, excellent, it'll be magnetic, that's great. Rest assured that it's not. So keep watching, because we're going to take this entire camera apart. Look at this, the microphone foam is deteriorating. It's falling apart right onto my bench right as I work here. Like right down to the CCD. This thing is coming apart completely. It's not going back together. You're going to see every screw come out, every little clip come out, every little lever, the heads, the motors, everything's coming apart. There's a way to get this thing open. Just have to pop it apart, and it should pop open. I can take the back cover off of it. But we're going to have some fun with it first. It comes off just kind of like that. Get it, kind of pop it out like that. Okay, so there is a tape in here. Drum is not seized or anything, so it can spin. Let's just see whether it will actually try to eject. Oh, no motor operation. Well, that part works. Okay, I've got the tape unraveled, so I'll take the power off, and then we just turn this little arm here slightly, and it will pop open. That's the way to get these things out. Oh, somebody was playing golf. To say, I don't know whose camera this is. Somebody just gave it to me. It's been sitting in a box for a while. Okay, it was donated to me to take apart. So we're going to remove the arrow mark screws. Just see how these other drivers fit too. And that one fits nicely as well. Magnetize it. And of course my old one that I've kind of fixed. Let's see if I can put any torque on this and have this one work. Ah, this one still works too. But you know what? I actually like the feel of these new ones. I got these on Amazon. If anybody's interested, I'll put the link up for this set. It was around, I think it was about $30 odd. These are real vessel made in Japan. They're not Chinese knockoffs. These are actually made in Japan. But I like the feel of these things. You can really spin the screws fast the way that these handles are set up. I can pretty much guarantee you what I'm going to find when I get into this camera is there's going to be capacitors leaking all over the place. Whether it's just a couple that are bad and are causing this thing not to work, or whether I think they're probably all going to be bad. So that's why I say I don't really anticipate doing any repairs on this thing. It's more than likely just going to come apart, and then we're going to condemn it. Remove all the arrow mark screws, and this thing should just pop apart. And do I have them all? Should be a couple more. These two on the side of this. That off. All my little switches falling out. And this one down here, it doesn't have to come out. I should just lift apart. Just like this. Cover comes off. Oh, more up top here. Okay, so there's the camera itself. Now, of course, the problem on these is going to be this has been repaired once, or has it? Maybe not. That looks like original. But the problem on this is going to be these surface mounted capacitors. And from all the lines that I saw in the picture, it's probably going to be the ones on the DC to DC board back here. This is the DC to DC converter board. Let's just take a look at this one. Got a couple of fuses on there. Actually, there's no surface mount caps on this particular board. Where the heck are they on this one? It's been so long since I've worked on one of these ones. This is one of these is a power board. And generally they're fairly well shielded. Camera board just unplugs from this thing. There's a little catch here that holds it in place. Just lift this little catch up and then the camera will actually lift right off. That's DC to DC converter, I think, for the camera block. I'm sure that's the DC to DC converter for this one. Yeah, there should be one for the VTR block too. That was, I think that's the preamp. That was the head preamp. This is the video board, but as you can see, it's just full of these surface mounted capacitors. Chroma process, luminance process here, record RF is down here. That board folds down, and here's the mechanical control. This is your mechanistic control and your drivers for servos. You can just smell the electrolytic from all these capacitors that are leaking. Oh, there's liquid. When I tried powering this up, these caps on here started spewing. Take a look. Take a look at a close up here. They've actually started spewing their electrolytic through the board. You can see it. It's shiny. Right down here. It's oozing through the board. You can see it. See that? That liquid? That's what happens is on these units, all these capacitors, stinks. All these capacitors here have been sitting around, and the rubber plugs that held the electrolytic in place have all deteriorated. But because the camera hasn't been powered up in God knows how long, they were just sitting there. And of course, as soon as I applied power to it, capacitors started to reform and they started to heat up. And as soon as they got a little bit of heat in them, the electrolytic became under pressure, and because the seals were all shot from just deterioration, that corrosive capacitor juice has now migrated into the board. And because there's a bunch of little holes in the board where there's through contacts for going to the multiple layer boards, you can see that it's actually coming through the board over here. And that's what happens with these things. That's why they weren't repairable. someone will say, oh, well, just replace all the capacitors. Well, the problem is you can't just replace the capacitors and expect the problem to be fixed, because once these capacitors vent, which they've already done, that liquid is corrosive, and this is a multi-layer board. This is probably it's at least a 2-layer, not just double-sided, but it's usually a 2 or 4-layer board, where there's actually internal layers which interconnect to different sites on the top and bottom. So you've got a bottom layer with components, as you can see here. You've got a top layer with components, and then those boards are sandwiched together. DC to DC converter, I believe it's this box here on this one. We'll open it up. One of the reasons I'm tearing this one apart today is because it's time to start getting rid of some of the junk that people have given me that is not going to be repairable, and I always want to tear things apart before I throw them out. So this is one that's going to be going in the garbage. I'll salvage the head off of it, because it's always good to have an 8mm head. You never know when you're going to need one of these. So I'll salvage the drum, and I'll probably salvage the capstan motor, and that's probably all I'm going to be able to salvage off this. So if I pop open this shield, the other side's like solder it on. There should be a bunch of capacitors in here, which there are. These ones at least aren't, but these are through hole, but they're also going to be shot. But this is our DC to DC converter. See our little transformer here, and a little booster buck converter coils. If for no other reason, the reason I'm doing this video is so that you guys can see what you want to avoid, because there are lots of people that are selling these old camcorders and stuff on eBay, and people are getting desperate because they're looking for a way to play their old tapes, and their camera's broken. So what do? They go and they look on eBay for a replacement, and people are buying them and finding that they don't work, and this is the reason why they don't work, is because of all these capacitors that have failed in them. And unfortunately, to replace all these capacitors, first of all, it's a time-consuming job to change them all, and even with a little air station, it's still a time-consuming job. But the problem is, once the electrolytic has gotten onto the board itself, you don't know how far the damage has gotten. So it's just not economical to repair them. You know, at any cost, it's not economical to try to fix these things. At least not this particular one, because of the age of these ones are so old. I put that DC to converter back on the camera board here. Let's see if I can power this thing up and see if we can actually see the parts failing, the capacitors spewing their guts. We'll let this thing burn up a bit more. place like that, and there's a screw that holds it in place. Not that this matters, but that's just an insulator that goes under it. Actually, I guess it does matter. I'll power this up with my external power supply, and we'll see what it does before I tear out the heads. Let me remove the head from this and hang on to it, just because, again, they're a plug-in head, but they're impossible to find, and the head on this is probably okay. Typically these things didn't get a lot of hours, although this will only work on an 8mm camera. It's not going to work properly on a high 8, and it won't work on a digital 8, obviously, but it never hurts to have a spare head. Kicking around. I know I'm going to probably get some comments from people saying that they still shoot on high 8 and 8mm. Seems to be a format that just won't die. There's some diehards out there that still like to use it, believe it or not. I don't understand why anybody would want to shoot anything on VHS or 8mm, because the quality of even the least expensive, cheapest, oldest digital camera is going to outperform any of these things. But there seems to be people out there that just like to use this old technology for whatever reason. They seem to want to try and save every camcorder that's ever been made. But that's not me. I moved on from analog video back in the 90s. Okay, 6 volts. And positive to the left, negative to the right. No. Is it on? Well, that's interesting. The capstan motor's turning. And of course the caution light comes on. See the caution light in the black flashing. Okay, this connector's for the display and the buttons on the side. There should be one here for the video outputs on the back here, so I don't know if this thing will actually turn on with it apart. It should. It should try to turn on when it's apart. Oh yeah, it does try to turn on. I'm looking at the monitor to see if I get an image, but so far no image. This is all I see when I turn it on. Seems like the zoom lens is trying to move, or I should say the autofocus is trying to focus on something. Okay, look at the motor. When I try to eject it, watch the speed this thing's taking off at. So we're getting some voltages in here. But nothing's really working properly. There's the little loading motor down here. It's got a little chip on board to control the actual loading and unloading. So it's sent a, I think it's just sent a, it's got the power going into it, but it's sent a signal to tell it to either go forward or reverse, because there's a little chip on the board here. Yeah, I think this thing here at this point is just going to be keep what I can off of it. I'll keep the pinch roller because the rubber doesn't feel to be in too bad a shape, and a pinch roller for an 8mm will work on any 8mm. We'll keep the heads off of it, and I'm going to dig that pinch roller out right now if I can. Come on. There's a good pinch roller. I'm going to keep that, and I'm going to keep the head. remove the head. And then the rest of this thing is going to go in the garbage. Well, get recycled. How these heads come off, they actually have a built-in head puller. You just remove the 2 screws and you put them into these screw holes that are next to it. Screw them down until they're flush, until they are making contact, and then just give them about a half a turn each at a time, and this will walk the head up. If I open this up, I can now lift the head out of the way. And there's the 8mm head. I'm going to put that away for safekeeping. Keep that portion of it. I think everything else on here is pretty much history. Maybe I'll keep the back tension band as well. And we'll take the take up and supply hubs. We'll take them off. So there's that out of the way. Back tension band is, where the heck is it held in on this thing? Take out that screw, and the back tension band will lift out, and then the hub will lift out as well. Here's the back tension arm out, the band. It just clips off, as you can see. And we'll take out the take-up hub. I don't think it's needed for anything. It's not a standard size, but we can remove it anyway. Oops, didn't want to break that, but oh well. Plastic is brittle. Move that out of the way, and then the arm should lift out. There we go. Okay, I got the take up and supply hubs. I'll hang on to those. Never know when they're going to come in handy. I think the rest of this chassis is pretty much time to send it on its way for recycling. So had it been a higher end camera, had it been a high 8, might have been worth. And one with a lot less capacitors in it. These ones here, with all the caps that they had in them, they just corrode like you wouldn't believe and ruined the circuit board. So this one had a drum servo problem, it had a video problem, it had a DC to DC converter problem. Oh, that's the viewfinder. We can probably salvage the viewfinder. Let's take out that little tube. Actually open this thing up and remove it. Let's see which one that had which tube this one has in it. Is it a round tube or is it a rectangular tube? Always neat to get these out. There's the little tube there. plugs in. Might be able to make this thing even display a picture. There's only a couple surface mounted caps on this one. Is this a square or a round tube? I think this is a round tube, this one. This one is a roundy. Yeah. Second anode is right through the back of the tube here. Let's see if we can get a picture on this thing. Which is the power lead on this and which is video. It's got about 6 terminals. Would have had one for the status LED, right? Or probably maybe 2 for the status LED. Power, ground, video, and ground, and status LED is probably the pins. But let's see if we can figure out which one's which on this. Don't ask me how I know, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say pins 1 and 2 is going to be your positive and negative. So I'm just going to put a couple of wires on here just to make it easier to connect to it. Which one did I think was the positive? I thought it was pin number 1. Just from looking at where the trace goes on this side here. The pin 1 ends up right here on this trace here. I think that trace is going to be positive, so let's we'll put a brown wire on there for positive. And pin 2, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that pin 2 is probably negative. I have no idea whether I'm right or wrong, by the way. We're either going to get this raster when I power it up, or we're going to get smoke. I'm sure some of you guys are probably hoping for smoke. Power. Negative is that one. And this one, I believe, is I would say I have a raster. So that's correct. Now, which one of these ones is video? I'm going to say it's the next one over. And why do I say that? Because when I touch it with my screwdriver, I see something on the screen. So I think that next one over is video. Let's hook a wire up to that and see whether we can give this thing any video. That would be pin number 3. Okay, we have light and we have video signals. Let me just find a video signal to hook up to this and see if we can get a picture on it. Well, there it is. This little tiny CRT is actually displaying a picture. It's got a bit of noise and stuff in it. It's got some lines in the picture too, as you can probably see. Maybe you can't. Maybe you can. See if I can get this camera a little lower and get a better shot of it. It's got an image. It does work. This is a little tube that's only, what, about a half an inch, I guess, something like that. Maybe a little larger. I think it's a half-inch picture, so it's, the tube itself, I think, is the diameter of, almost the diameter of this this cover. I wonder if I can take it off. Oh, that's better. My video ground fell off. I was wondering why the picture was so bad. My video ground wire came off. That looks a little better. I don't think I'm going to get the tube out of this this housing here because it appears to be glued. What they've done is they put the tube into this frame, and the tube itself is probably going to be just about the size of this bezel here, and that frames it up, and then they put the back half and screw it on, and then they glue it. So I don't think I'm going to be able to get this off without breaking the tube. I don't really want to break the tube. It's under high vacuum, but it's kind of a cute little tube, if you know what I mean. I mean, these things are so neat. Miniaturization. I love these little tubes. You know, not that they're useful for anything, but just the fact that they were able to make such a small little picture tube. I still think the other one that I've got, the rectangular tube with the actual yoke on it, that I showed off before, I think that one's actually cooler than this. This has got a yoke here, but it's got a metal cover around it. And this one being a round tube is not quite as cool as the rectangular tube, in my opinion. This one more resembles like a little scope tube, even though it is magnetic deflection. Maybe if I heat up the plastic and melt it, it'll come off. There it is. There's the tube. Cool. Let's see if it still works. Better still work. All that work to take that apart. And there's the picture. Neat, huh? Yeah, which way's up? I think that's up. That way. There you go. There's that little black and white picture on that little round tube. It's going to be one of the smallest little CRTs that's been made. But I think the little square one is probably a little bit smaller because it's corner to corner. This would be a 1/2 inch picture. We'll measure the actual tube. We grab a tape measure. Yep, 3/4 of an inch. So this is not as small as the other one. The other one being a 1/2 inch tube. This is a 3/4 inch tube. Still pretty small, but not as small as the other one. Actually, is this 3/4 or 2/3? I guess it's 2/3 of an inch. If we measure from the inside of the actual glass, this is a 2/3 of an inch tube. This would be the same size as a little 2/3 inch Vidicon tube. Would have the same size of a target. In fact, let's get a 2/3 inch Vidicon and put it up beside it. So there we go for comparison size. 2/3 inch Vidicon tube on the left, 2/3 inch CRT on the right. Obviously the Vidicon tube is actually a lot bigger because it uses an external yoke, but the neck of the tube is a lot bigger, and as you can see, it's actually a lot longer too. This being the camera tube. But they're essentially the same type of thing. They're both a cathode ray tube. Just this one here scans a constant beam, and the image that's projected on the tube gets read out through the target, which is this photoresistive coated target that the beam scans from the back, which produces a video signal on this ring. And the CRT, on the other hand, the beam is modulated by a control grid as it scans the surface of the tube to make the phosphorus light up. Okay, continuing the teardown on the chassis, we're going to take the unit completely apart. So we'll pop the camera off again. And when I say tear it down, I mean completely. So there's the one board. This is the fuse board here. If you're wondering whether I'm going to be keeping any of these boards, the answer is no. Once it's torn down, I'm going to be recycling this whole entire camera. Okay, a couple more screws to get into the mechanism. Where are we here? There's another hinge on this. Another screw down the bottom here that comes out. Another connector. These boards should pop apart like that, and then this board will come out. There should be another screw in here somewhere. Take out the beeper. That's the little piezo beeper there. This board folds out this way. Undo another clip here. As you can see, these were very well integrated. Another screw, a ground screw here. And here we are down to the mechanism. If we just take out these clips, for that matter, I can take this drum motor out. If we want to keep the drum motor, I can just take these 3 screws out, that hold it in place. There's one here. And the whole drum assembly will drop out from the other side. There is another clip, another little plug that's plugged in at the back that I can undo. Undo this plug here for the preamp. Yeah, this is the preamp board here. Undo the head. For that matter, even though I took the head off this, I could put the actual head back onto this drum and store it on the drum itself. So I took the head off, but it's easy enough to put this back on. Just take out the 2 screws that I used as the head puller. Place the head back on. It only goes on one way. There's 3 sets of pins, and there's one that's got a little counterweight which will fit right over top of where one of the sets of pins would be, like that. Capstan motor is next. We'll take out the bracket. And And then the capstan motor unplugs from the back there, and it's held in place from the top, I think. There's the capstan motor and capstan assembly. What else can we take out on this thing? Take out the loading motor. The loading motor is held in from the bottom down here. There's two screws that hold the loading motor in place. My other screwdriver might give me more torque. That's if that JB weld doesn't break. Yeah, that one gives me more torque. Loading motor. What else can we take out on this? A couple little belts. One little belt there. And a little belt that's right here. This is where this other screwdriver is better. Even though it's broken, I was able to glue it. And you get some pretty good torque with this one, because of the larger wooden grip. Okay, there's the two-toothed belts. The loading shaft. Little drive shaft here for the loading assembly. It just pops out. The loading guides, loading gears. Take out the cassette basket on this one. It was take out this last screw here, and this whole mechanism should pop out. That should release the sub mechanism. A couple more on the side, I think. A lot of screws in this little camera, isn't there? One more screw here. And now the whole sub-chassis lifts out. Undo this plug. And this one on this side. This is for the detection switches. See, they had a lot of circuit boards on these things, didn't they? Here's a little mode switch right there, right? they were a problem on these things too. And the amount of teardown required to get at this to clean it was just, you know, this was a $100, over $100 repair bill when these mode switches had to be cleaned or replaced, because the amount of work required to tear it down to get at that little switch. I mean, I'm kind of moving along here pretty quick because this thing's not going back together. I just wanted to tear it down so you can see all the little gears and so forth inside here. Cut washers that pop off, and then that lever pops out, and these gears will pop out as well. They have their own cut washer on them. Guides had little screws to hold them in on the bottom. Same with this one. These guides had little screws on the bottom of them here to hold them in place. There's the head base that the head block fastened into. Now once these are removed, then the guides themselves can be removed. Like that. So you can see a lot of thought went into these things when they developed them as to the order things had to be put together. They were like putting together a precision watch. They really were. The guides were held in place by that base assembly, so then the guides come out. And the guides here they have little tiny screws in there, little lock screws, so that when they were set, you tighten down the lock screw so that the guide couldn't rotate. You see, the guides themselves can rotate for the alignment. There's a little lock screw there that would prevent it from turning. Anyway, I think I've picked off most of the stuff from this chassis. Just the front, just the loader itself, which is held in place by another couple of screws on either side here. There's the cassette mechanism out. What else can I take out on this thing? Sure. It's held in place by a little cut washer on the bottom here. And that'll pop off, and the guide will pop out through the top. That's about it. This thing is pretty much down to nothing. Spring comes off there. There's the pinch roller. That's pretty much down to the bare chassis. Anyway, oh, let's take apart the camera part. Take apart the lens. Show you guys a CCD. So this thing comes off here. This board comes off here. More plugs. Ground wire. CCD housing is in here. This is the CCD assembly. Take off the shield. There's a couple more circuit boards on this thing. Okay, a couple more screws here, and this should lift the it shows how good JB Weld is. I couldn't even take those screws out with that other screwdriver. But this one that I glued back together works great. There's the CCD. This is just the lens assembly with motors to turn for autofocus and for zoom. So there's two motors for the autofocus and the zoom, and this one here is the iris, which was another common problem that would stick on them, and we'd have to take the whole lens apart to get the iris out to unstick it. Yes, we used to actually tear these things down. People at the time wanted to spend the money to tear a lens apart to fix the iris that would get stuck. Usually resulted after them leaving their camera in the car where it overheated and all the grease or the lubricant in the lens melted and dripped down onto the blades of the iris, and the only way to fix it was to tear the lens apart. So you had to take the lens down like this, take out the screws that hold the lens together. Another one on this side I have to get at to do it. But as you can see, it was a lot of work required to get down to this thing to fix it. You had to take out this optical sensor without breaking it, of course. It's an optical sensor that detected where the focus was, you see. Optical reflectors with the optical sensor right up here to tell the system where the lens was in terms of its focus position. And then the screw comes out. Take off this bracket. Then we got the lens apart, sort of, and the iris is on here. So then we would actually have to take this piece out, because this is the iris motor here. It opens and closes the iris. You can see it inside the lens here. We'd actually have to take this piece off. Of course, if Sony had a quote to do this, they would just quote on a new lens. They'd just say your lens had to be replaced. But then the cost of repairing it was in the stratosphere. So what we used to do is we used to take the actual lens apart like that, so we could get at the two blades. This is only a two blade iris on this one. As you can see, it just moves back and forth like that to open and close. Some lenses had a 5-blade shutter. This one's just a 2. But what would happen is lubricant would drip into and get on these and cause them to stick. Anyway, that's the lens torn down. I'm not putting it back together. I'm putting it in the garbage. Like most of the stuff, this is going to go in the recycle bin. I keep these little motors, but the rest of the stuff, garbage. Here's the CCD. Get a closer look at the CCD. There's the circuitry that processes it. Let's take a closer look at the CCD itself. We'll take the cover off of it here. Okay, there's the CCD itself. This glass that looks green is actually the low pass filter and the infrared cut filter. But this is what gives you your color. I think that's what this. No, this one's just the infrared filter, I think. The color filter is actually on the chip itself. This is just the infrared filter that all cameras have. So there's already one on this camera itself. If I turn off turn on the night shot, it will remove the infrared filter, and then this infrared filter would put it back on. Although this thing gives you a green cast, but that's what this is. This is the infrared cut filter. It gives everything kind of a greenish tinge to it. It's actually made up of like 4 pieces of glass that are sandwiched together to cut infrared, as you can see. Anyway, that's the infrared filter. Here's the CCD. That's about as close a shot as I can give you of this CCD, but it's pretty detailed. You can see all the individual bonding wires there that connect the chip, connect the light sensitive chip to the outside world. I don't know if I can go in any closer or not without the camera going out of focus. Yeah, I think that's about the limit. Unless I can get the camera closer to this, which is, it's only an inch or two above, not even that. Yeah, maybe an inch. See if I can get down a little closer. Now we just have the problem with getting the light in there. I got a light shining right alongside of the camera here, right down at the bench, just so you guys can see this. But that's about as close as I'm going to be able to get this thing. Literally, the camera itself is only about a half an inch away from the actual chip. I can't even, it's so close, I can't even fit my fingers in there. That's how close we are to this thing. It is literally skimming the surface of this chip. That's how good this little Sony camera is as far as focus. I can pretty much focus down to the dust on the lens. Can we almost read what it says there on the edge of the chip? See the writing on the edge of the chip? Take out these screws on the back, and that'll take the bracket off. I think that'll take the bracket off. Maybe not. I have to unsolder the chip to be able to take that out, to get a closer up view of the chip. I'll have to unsolder it or cut it out, one of the two. Well, there it is. There's the chip. As you can see, it's quite small, and this is big by today's standards. The sensors today are much smaller than this, but there is the actual CCD. If I bring the camera down closer, can we get an even closer shot now that I've removed it from that circuit board? Probably. Dust on the surface. Can only go so low, and then we won't get any light into it. I'm afraid that's about it as far as how close we can get to this thing. But anyway, there's the chip itself. Anyway, that's about it. I can't show you any more than this because I've taken this thing down as far as I can take it, and that is that's it for this one. See, my nice new screwdrivers are now dirty. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this total teardown of this Sony little 8mm camera right down to the image sensor. I might hang on to that just because it's kind of cool. I'll put that in my collection of little parts, little components. Same with, I might even just hang on to the drum just as a reminder because it's so small. But anyway, certainly not the smallest though. They made smaller drums for the micro compact cameras, and the DAT ones were smaller as well, but this is the standard 8mm drum. They made one that was quite a bit smaller in the TR series of camera. Anyway, thanks for watching. We will catch you in the next one real soon. Bye for now.